Right, what's going on? It's Fantasy Sports Talk, Week 6 running back segment. I'm Kevin Pate.
Blake Bagwell.
And we're going to talk about some guys who have been struggling mightily this season. And you probably wasted a first round or second round pick picking these guys up. So we're going to give you some insight. Where should you kind of go from here? Why have they been struggling? And just kind of what we see these guys doing in the future.
Exactly. I'm not ready to say you wasted your first round pick,
Right.
but some guys you're regretting it or you're really frustrated because they just haven't taken off to the level that we were all anticipating they would.
Right, and the guys that we're talking about are like the Chris Johnsons, the Alfred Morris, C.J. Spiller, Doug Martin, Ray Rice has even been struggling.
Yeah.
Like Maurice Jones-Drew even. Those were guys that were pretty solid, top 15, top 10 running backs, and easily guys that were in the top 30 of most people's mock drafts. Right now, what I see the biggest problem is with that is this is a pass-happy league.
For sure.
You look, quarterbacks are going for over 400 yards what seems like every single game.
Yeah, it's making it harder and harder on defenses.
Right.
Because you have these quarterbacks that can sling it like they can.
Back in the day, a quarterback completion percentage of 60% was pretty good. And now you see someone at 60%, and you're like, that's awful. You want them to be sitting around 68, 70% now. And also, another thing is, with these running backs, and why they might not be getting the biggest fantasy points is there's more running back by committees now.
For sure.
You see it right now with Giovanni Bernard and BenJarvus Green-Ellis are kind of splitting the workload every now and then in Cincinnati. Ben Tate's even striking some stuff away from Arian Foster. Yeah. And there's, of course, your running back by committee teams.
Yeah.
New Orleans, New England, Denver. It's a different guy leading the team in rushing every single week. And it's hard to keep track who's going to get the ball.
Yeah, and then on top of that, especially some of the guys that we just mentioned, they're on teams that are struggling in their own right. Whether it's a rookie quarterback situation, growing pains within the offensive line, or just some sort of distraction in the team that's really hurting their performance.
Right. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to rank our top 5 running backs from this point forward. All right.
Just guys that have struggled up to this point that we still like to keep around because whether those teams maybe have struggled up to this point, it's finally time for those teams to at least know who they are at this point.
Right.
You know, they may not be world beaters, but they at least have an identity enough to get their running backs back in the mix.
And I'm not advocating like dropping people that we don't put in the top 5. There's still plenty of football left to play. Mm-hmm. These are just who
we're not talking about Adrian Peterson today, but that doesn't mean he's not the top of all of our list. It's just he's going to be fine. These are guys that have struggled up to this point.
Absolutely.
Not to panic on just yet.
All right, so why don't you go ahead and do yours first?
First guy that comes to mind is Doug Martin, and that just goes right into what I just said about distractions and quarterback problems and really whole team problems. That Tampa Bay team has looked lost up to this point this year. The whole Josh Freeman circus is finally done. They have Mike Glennon, who's come in, looked pretty good in his first game. Not great. He still has a lot to learn.
Right.
But I think now that, maybe a little more used to this offense, they can put the Josh Freeman era behind him. It'll really get Doug Martin going, I think.
Now, I like Doug Martin. I put him at number 2 on mine for the same reasons you mentioned. I think now maybe with a steady quarterback and Mike Glennon and one that doesn't have the off-the-field problems that Josh Freeman brought to the table, maybe this team can finally get out of the limelight. Maybe they can finally get something started. They're 0-4 right now. They, like you said, look completely lost. But
definitely,
this offense starts and ends with Doug Martin.
Yep.
He's going to get his carries. He's going to get his looks. He's not going to be benched for anybody coming up soon.
He's just too good and too reliable. That's the reason I put him at number 1 over a guy that we'll talk about in just a second, my number 2, because he has been so reliable. You don't see him getting injured, and he's just always fighting through, and I just think he's a really safe pick.
My number 1 was Ray Rice out of Baltimore.
That's what I was saying. Ray Rice's injury issues is the only reason why he wasn't number 1 on my list.
And really, the injury issues hasn't been. He missed what week and a half.
Nothing to panic about.
Yeah, and a reason I like Ray Rice so much is mostly because I don't like Joe Flacco enough. He had a great postseason in 2013. He won the Super Bowl. He got that big contract. Mm-hmm. Good for you, Joe Flacco.
Right.
I'm not sold on you as being my number 1 quarterback for a fantasy team yet. Much less do I think he can take all the pressure, and be able to distribute the ball wherever he needs to. Ray Rice is the catalyst for that offense.
100%.
Like Doug Martin, it starts and ends with Ray Rice.
Yep.
I know Bernard Pierce has gotten in there. He's taken some carries. Make no mistake. Ray Rice is the number 1 here. He's the back to have. I like him the most going forward.
They're going to feed the ball to him to get the game going, and then he's going to get the touches to close games out.
Exactly.
So you definitely don't have to worry about Ray Rice getting his touches, and then hopefully it'll lead to more production. production.
Right. My number 3,
Number 3.
Alfred Morris out of the Washington Redskins.
He's also my number 3.
Okay, awesome. Now, we all saw the Washington Redskins opening game against Philadelphia. They looked awful.
Mm-hmm.
RG3 looked lost, like he needed preseason and didn't get any.
Right.
And it just kind of affected the whole team. So Alfred Morris hasn't been a big contributor fantasy-wise, but Robert Griffin III starting to pick it up.
Right.
I think as soon as he starts threading defenses with his arms and with his legs, Alfred Morris is going to get some touches, and Alfred Morris is going to
For sure.
make people hop
I mean,
right
like
back
you
on
said,
that
right now,
bandwagon.
no one's really worried about RG3 running the ball. But when they have to account for RG3 to throw, RG3 to run, and then he can start handing it off to Alfred Morris to give him a third thing to look for, it's really going to hurt his playmaking ability, or help his playmaking ability. And he really has been productive up to this point. He hasn't been terrible.
Okay.
He just
it's nothing. Like I said, he just hasn't been the top
the guy
10,
we saw last
the
year.
top 10 fantasy player
Right.
that we were all thinking he was going to be this year.
Definitely.
But by no means do I think he is
He'll
going
be just
to
fine.
like mellow out where he is. My number 4 back is CJ Spiller,
Okay.
and I understand Fred Jackson right now is, running the show out in Buffalo. CJ Spiller is a dynamic back. He's a dynamic player. He's just got to get it all figured out.
Right.
And I'm not sold on Fred Jackson.
No.
I think speak about injury problems. That's been Fred Jackson's problem before.
Yeah.
I think he's going to go back down, and I think it's going to be Spiller's job to lose. Right now, they're kind of splitting the carries a little bit. I mean, like I said, Fred Jackson's doing a great job. He's making the most out of his opportunities, and you should own him if he's available in any of your leagues.
For sure.
But CJ Spiller in the long run is my back to have out of that Buffalo offense.
And, I like CJ Spiller for the same reasons you were saying. Like, the Buffalo offense is shaky at best.
Right.
But those two running backs, CJ Spiller, Fred Jackson, are really the one thing that can propel them to stay around in games and sneak up on some teams.
Right.
I like Spiller. He scares me to death with his inconsistency
Mm-hmm.
because, we saw the big game he had. But even in the big game he had, it was because of one big run.
Right.
So we've seen it. We've seen it before. Going into this year's draft, people liked him as high as number 2 just because they see the potential. But he's definitely one just to keep an eye on.
Right.
I like him moving forward. Definitely don't get rid of him. But I actually put him on number 5 in my list. So
Okay.
he didn't go quite as high as 4, but I still like his potential.
Okay.
So definitely not somebody to drop or even think about giving away just yet.
My number 5 here is Chris Johnson from Tennessee.
Who I had bumped up to number 4,
All right.
surprisingly.
And Blake's not a big Chris Johnson.
Not a big Chris Johnson fan, if you haven't known that by now.
I like Chris Johnson because I know he starts off slow,
Mhm.
but numbers don't lie. He's not been a dynamic back this year.
Right.
His big week last week was because of a big receiving touchdown.
Right.
He's supposed to be the guy that's going to just sprint up and down the field when you give him the ball and take care of stuff, and he's not doing that right now. But Chris Johnson, also a notoriously slow fantasy starter. If anybody can remember his abysmal first 6 weeks last season, he picked it up at the end of the year. And I'm more just making on maybe he's just one of those running backs that's a slow starter, and he picks it up as the season goes on.
And that's why I've been down on Chris Johnson, because I've seen this before. Like, he struggles. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's I'm saving myself for a playoff run. I don't know what it is.
In Tennessee, that's foolish.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't get how he, looks all world one week and then just kind of disappears for a week. I don't know the guy enough to say, he's taking the week off or something like that. But he's just so frustrating to me.
No, absolutely.
But the reason I did put him on the list and did put him number 4 on my list is for kind of what you just said. Like, he has the potential to break out, and if they want to get him involved in the passing game, even better for fantasy owners.
Right.
And then the other reason, just the division he's in. Like, he plays Jacksonville twice. Like, he's gonna get opportunities against weaker defenses to show what he can do. It's gonna be up to him to do it.
Right, and like we said, these are just our top 5 moving forward. If you guys own some other people who've been struggling, like Maurice Jones-Drew, don't drop him. I still think Maurice Jones-Drew will turn around also. I just don't put him as one of my top 5 backs moving forward because of how awful that offense out.
And that's what I was saying. Like, some of these other teams where I think Tampa Bay is on the rise, Baltimore's figuring it out. I think they'll be fine. They have their defense has been playing well as of late. Jacksonville's not doing anything. They're so awful. I feel for Jones-Drew because he could carry it 30 times, but he has no line to run behind.
Right.
There's no other threat on that team, so it's like, let's have 6 guys spy Jones-Drew, and I don't know. It's just going to be such an uphill battle for him.
if you took one of your first two or three rounds on a guy that is struggling, don't drop him yet. It's too early. These are just our top 5 moving forward. Catch us on our next segment where we'll dive into wide receivers and how to replace Julio Jones.
All right.